I mean, when I say original, I'm talking about manuscript texts, ones that go back before the contemporary period.
So
yeah, you can find those in manuscript forums, and you can find them, in Suleymaniya, in Istanbul, you can find them in the Zahriya, in Damascus. Those things exist. But you see, oftentimes a book exists out there, and it may be, that's why a good critical text, if you want to see it, for example, an Arabic text, is one that when you open it up, it has a lot of introduction with photocopies of handwritten manuscripts that have been examined. Because that's telling you it's probably quite old. If anything, the Ottomans didn't really start publishing Islamic texts until the late 1700s. So when you start, handwritten manuscripts are very important. So anything that is published in the 1800s or the late 1800s, early 20th century, if they're being printed, then they've been printed from a manuscript and they may have been altered in some way. It may have errors. And so it's always important to go back and try to find older manuscripts. You may not get an original, but you may get something that is maybe autographed by the author. There is, for example, one of the works, some of the works in the Arabic that actually have a signature, so that's great. It's a good thing. For example, would you like to have something like that? You would. Anyone would. Who would want, an epistle from Paul with a signature, in a manuscript? The Christians go freak out, man. Not just a fragment. It's actually something with a signature on it. So it's important, and we should be wanting that. Unfortunately, that's a new thing. But there's a different issue when you alter text. That's a totally different issue. Yes.
I just had a question. I don't know if I understand it correctly. Earlier on, we talked about weak positions, such as, for example, a woman who's been raped and how she might be considered quote-unquote guilty. Or, for example, I guess these positions. I know we have done a lot to explain them, why they're not true, but some people still have these positions. So, one more question about this, say, those.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you really need to follow up and present what you know to be more authentic, or dealing with it factually. That was sort of my first soapbox stand tonight, was that there's a little lack of real knowledge out there. And notice the lack of real knowledge. I mean, I don't know how well I was, but when I try to present things, I'm trying my best to present it as I know it, as broad as I can, not trying to deceive any of you or trying to get you in a certain position. I mean, if I felt like things I said weren't authentic, I hope I'd be honest enough to say that. I'm not here to promote something. I want to promote an authentic Islam, but I want to promote one which, for me, seems to clearly be what, as best I can tell, is there. I could be wrong, but that's my intention. I think everyone, in their own perspective, tries to do that. I would hope they do. And it's problematic to try to maintain, authority, authenticity, consistency. But the best you can do is, on some of these things, is if you research them, ask questions, try to hash it out, and see what you can find. And that's all I can say about that.
And also, is these positions being, I guess, are they within the sphere of, like, I guess, ikhtilaf in Islam?
Well, ikhtilaf is everywhere, man.
And if someone was to follow that, in that case, would they be...
Well, you see, that's a hard one to walk, you see, because it's like, somewhere at the end of the day, you gotta do something. You can't just walk, you can't live around ikhtilaf, you can't, you gotta do something, you can't like that, you gotta do something, you gotta eventually agree to follow something. You gotta do it, you gotta pray, you gotta fast, you gotta go shopping, and all that stuff. So, how do you do that? Well, I think at the end of the day, you examine the best you can, and you make that decision, like I did. I've gone through stages. I went from this, went from that. Tried a bit of that didn't work out. Tried this, didn't work out. Until I finally found something that made, to me, a lot of sense. It seemed to be really consistent. So that's why, I mean, if I come off, like sort of anti-neo-Salafi or whatever, I am. Because I do. And I don't say that Because, it's just that when I really looked at their arguments, and I was living in Medina, and I was seeing all that, and I was looking at all, many student arguments and classical texts, and I saw a lot of different things laid out before me. I saw a lot of consistency with what I call mainstream classical studism than I saw there. I was just looking at the book that made more sense to me. I just saw a lot of consistency. Of course, the argument of going back to the Quran and Sunnah is so appealing, but everyone has always gone back to Quran and Sunnah. No one has not done that. I don't know any Muslim by name who in some way doesn't go back to Quran and someone's Sunnah. Whether it's Ahlul Bayt or whoever it may be, it's someone's precedent you go back to. It's everyone. Now, the thing is, when one looks at history, one sees that some of these things that we call the Salafiyya really is a modern thing. It really is modern. You can find its place where it occurs in history. So it's, and I, being raised as a Southern Baptist, and my whole thing about Protestantism, I'm like, hey, we see this before in history somewhere else. The same type of arguments and restore back to pure faith and all that. And I think it's to me, it's like a flag. Everyone talks about, when someone talks about going back to the original pure thing, especially after 1,300 years, that should always make a flag. How can you go back? In order to get back that, as I say, in order to get back to the pure generation, you've got to walk on a lot of heads to get there. Who are these heads between you and that generation? All you know about them is what these people told you. And if you don't trust them, how do you know you got the truth from that? We weren't there when the Sahaba made a decision about the Uthmanic text. We trust them, don't we? We trust them. We don't have a manuscript that's been dug up. A complete Quran from the year 34 Hijrah that we can compare. We don't have one. What we're going to do? We trust. On that earliest period of Islam, when it comes to the Quran text, we are trusting our narrative that it's true, because we don't have any manuscripts enough to prove it otherwise. And the best thing you have is that proof. Right? That's the same argument you use with the Christian against the Bible. It's the same argument you use against the Quran. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander on this one. So, eventually, and we Muslims, like when I mentioned with Sharia, we had this whole concept of Sharia, but I'm hoping I showed you something today. It may not be what you thought it was in that thing that exists out there, that Sharia. Because I don't think that I used to think it was that thing out there, and I'm finding out it's not that thing, perhaps, that I thought it was. So I have to alter my position, how I see it. And I don't have a problem with that. It doesn't shape my world, it doesn't alter me, it just gives me greater clarity. I'm still Hanafi, predominantly, a little bit of Shafi mixed in there. It gives a little bit of spice in my life. And I have a spiritual tradition I follow, and I can examine it critically, and there might be things there I might, have to, like, for example, one of the questions that we were having in our little discussion group is how to use weak hadith on those larger cosmological discussions. And why, like when Ibn Arabi talks about, for example, using that hadith may be weak or even maybe fabricated, in a sense, it's a true statement. Someone said it somewhere, but it may actually represent reality. So how do you incorporate that? So he who talks about kashf comes in and plays into a source of knowledge and to affirm a reality which may come textually, but textually it's not as authentic as you may like it. And that's a discussion, I was asked to answer that question. I've delayed it because I've been busy with this stuff. I'm not going to ignore it, but I will, So there are a lot of things like that, even for me, that, you know, but I still accept a tradition, and I follow a tradition, and instead of practices and stuff, and that's fine. I mean, I've found a lot of positives in it, but I know that it's also how it was formulated, how it came into being, are different ways it came. Some through textual evidence, some through personal experience, some through ijtihad. I know all that, and I have a problem with that. Because I know deep down that there's the Quran there are the Hadith there. The Quran is much more stable text than the Hadith, and that's true. And yet also there is the human effort to try to understand, interpolate, expound, explicate these things. And I have to accept that also as a source of knowledge. I do. I just have to. Rambam Bhuti mentions here that when an Arab uses the verb yuqatil and yaqtulu, and he means a certain thing, I have to really accept Rambam Bhuti's understanding of that usage of verb, because he's more of an authority on his native tongue than I am. I cede that to him. I could go and follow up and ask Arabic linguists, is this sound, and then I could do that, and maybe I might, but not have that yet. But I see authority. Anyway, so that's the first thing, is this problem of the wording. Another was the Muhajirun thing here. Now, Umar Bakri Muhammad and Anjum Chaudhry. So the Muhajirun, which I look at here, they had this position. The Muslims living in the West are living under a covenant of security. It is not allowed for them to fight anyone with whom they have a covenant of security. Abiding by the covenant of security is an important obligation upon all Muslims. However, for these Muslims living abroad, they are not under any covenant with the kuffar in the West, so it is acceptable for them to attack the non-Muslims in the West, whether in retaliation for constant bombing and murder. So this basically was a fatwa by British Muslims that's okay, 9/11 was a good thing. Now obviously, this is also, I was in England in 2005, in July, when the bombings took place in London. I was up in Bradford. And I personally experienced an interesting experience. I haven't told any of you guys. Have I told you my story about being surrounded with helicopters and the police that came? Oh man. I've been under one of those raids. It was fun. All over a box of mangoes. I love mangoes. So we were staying in this town where the Bronte sisters lived, who wrote Wuthering Heights and all that stuff, you know. So we were staying in this house. It was like 700 years old. We rented it. The house was like that, you know. And so it was just after we were there, and the bombings had taken place. Well, you know, coincidence, right? So, of course, I had my turban on, and, you know, a group of guys, you know, in turbans and beards, you know, renting in a white town, you know, a little small British town, renting a cottage, you know, and so we came in at night, and we had these boxes, and so we picked up mangoes. Well, someone had called. It was night, and they called the police. That there were these men with beards and turbans, and they've got these boxes, and they're taking them in this house. So it was morning time, you know, it's morning time, here we were, morning time. And I saw a car pull up, and I saw these men get out. And I looked at the window, and I saw police, and I said, everyone get their passports. And they had blocked off the roads. I just sent my brother down to the car to get something. He was on the ground. They had grabbed him, handcuffed him, threw him into a paddy wagon. And we had a helicopter flying around. And the police came in. And they wanted to see our passports and everything, you know. And they were like checking everything. So, it's really funny. So I was like, well, what's going on? I said, and they're like, you know, well, there was this report that you guys are here. And he said, well, what are you doing? Well, we're just meeting here, having this, you know, like a bunch of Sufis hanging out here. Well, what's that? Well, we're doing this, you know. Well, those reports you guys had bought, oh, you mean these, the mangoes? Yeah, this is the boxes right here. They're mangoes. You want any? I was talking like that. I said, you want any? And you guys want some coffee or anything? I made them coffee, and I served the policeman coffee, you know, we had such chat. Because outside we have helicopters, and all, of course, the neighbors are all like looking, you know, and the streets are blocked off, and that's what happened, you know. And so they stayed a little bit, and they had coffee, and they were very apologetic afterwards, and that was it. And when I left England that trip, as I was leaving, I got pulled over by the police. You know, not the guys in suits, you know, like security, I don't know, home office or someone like that. I don't know. I don't know. I only wish they had like a time portal machine or something like that. Something like Doctor Who would have been cool. You know, but our life, we think are only BBC, right? So they asked me, you know, they were like trying to recruit me to help them with integrating into the Muslim community, to help them, you know, find out people and stuff like that, information. They wanted to talk about that. So, you know, I went back to America. I don't have time for stuff like that, you know. But it was an interesting thing. You could ask some of the guys at Sajid, you know, you could ask Sajid about that day, 2005, when we were.
Was he there?
Oh yeah, it was really, you know, Sajid was there and Dawood was there, but it wasn't, I didn't know what Tawheed. But it was really interesting. And it was a real full-on police raid, like a terrorist raid. We were in the newspapers and everything. So I've been there, done that, you know.
Terrorists found plotting mango plot.
Yeah, and it was like, you know, and there was another one. There was another mango boxes, and you know, I was like, what is it? Bearded man in mango boxes. And they have a really good mango. They have those mangoes from Pakistan, the little ball ones that are really sweet. And that's the ones I got. You know, they were like £5 a box. You know, you get like 8 mangoes for £5. The good deals. So then the idea was then that it was okay. This is a British group. You know, it's really stupid to think like this, right? Saying it's okay. You know, as long as we're here, you don't do anything, but it's okay, and we support. And they actually had like a protest, the 9/11, the 19 martyrs, the 19, the glorious 19. They want, you know, to honor these 19 suicide bombers, right? This is the group. So then, Sheikh Muhammad Akiti, who works at Oxford, he responded with this fatwa, you know, about this whole issue. And first of all, he mentioned, you know, that it's la yajuz qatlu nisa'ihim wa la sibyahim idha lam yuqatilu. That it's not permissible to kill the women or children if they do not fight you. Okay? So he argues a case then about arguing positions why this is not sound. You can't just kill indiscriminately. The first one is this evidence. The Imam Subki made it unequivocally clear that scholars have understood from this prohibition the standard rule of engagement taken is that a Muslim soldier may not kill any women or any child soldiers unless they are in combat directly. And they can only be killed in self-defense. This Imam now is in his Majmu'. He narrates this from Imam Subki. And then he goes on to discuss this. It goes without saying that men and innocent bystanders who are not direct combatants are also included in this prohibition. The nature of this prohibition is so specific and well defined that there can be no legal justification, nor can there be a legitimate Shari'i excuse for circumventing this convention of war by targeting non-combatants or civilians whatsoever. And the hukm shari of killing them is not only haram but also a major sin, kaba'ir, kabira, and contravenes one of the principal commandments of our way of life. This is a legal principle. He actually quotes from the Mujalla, the Ottoman text. Amrul jihad mawqulan ila imam wa ijtihadi wa yalzimu ri'ayat ta'atu bima yarahu min dhalika wa lil imam wa amirin khiyarun bayna kaffi wa qital. And so the command to fight is waqala is bound to the imam and his ijtihad. And therefore the people, the people under the imam are obliged to obedience in in his position. While the imam wa amir khiyar, and the imam and his Amir or one who stands in this case have the choice on whether to desist from fighting or from fighting. Desist or to fight. Now, obviously, what's the argument of the Al-Qaeda that these Muslim governments are illegitimate? Okay, they're illegitimate. But there can be other discussions on that. As for suicide, the only time you have suicide is a legitimate war or a non-ceasefire in place. And that's only if you, and that idea of the hajm al-wahid, the one, a man who is a soldier, he's at that conflict zone right now, he's actually fighting, and he actually charges onto this enemy by himself, where maybe he's going to fight until he is slain. That's permissible. But it has to have these conditions. It has to be a legitimate war. There's been no war declared legitimately here. 9/11 occurred. There were lots of issues there that where the 9/11 bombers circumvented legitimate courses of authority. Now, we have a discussion about these Muslim countries, and the rulers. But, classical scholars, have never, they would, accept corrupt rulers over anarchy. But that's a longer discussion for us to get on here today. We want to have that discussion. This is Imam Ghazali's issue about the hajm, why the one who charges off becomes a martyr by his own. And he talks about that. It is only permissible for him to advance and suffer the consequences if he knows that he will be able to fight effectively until he is killed, or knows that he will be able to demoralize the hearts and minds of the non-Muslim army by their witnessing his courage and by their conviction that the rest of the Muslim army are selfless in their loyalty to sacrifice for the sake of God. The closest modern non-Muslim parallel would be to die for one's country. By this, their will to fight, their shauqa, will become demoralized, and so this may cause panic and mutib. All this did for 9/11 was what? Did it cause America to withhold? No. It created a bigger problem. It provoked them. And maybe that's what they wanted. I don't know. But on a legal, on a military perspective, from a technical position as a Muslim, military commander, you want to try to minimize conflict. You don't want to incite your enemy. So you don't want to do things that are going to make it worse. And particularly worse, it's going to be worse for civilians, particularly if you know how your potential enemy will deal with civilians. And these Muslims in 9/11 and others like them should very well know how the United States deals with these people. The United States has never had a problem in its history to kill non-combatants. We may claim a moral high road or propagate or have this discussion that non-combatants. Collateral damage, the United States may talk about, but it is very reckless about that because of its technology, how it uses weaponry. Modern weaponry is, unfortunately, not always as specific as we would want. And that's a whole issue. Muslims are forced into using bombs and things that are so reckless. They really cut a grain against civil warfare, if there's such an oxymoronic. Chivalrous warfare, I might use that term. Anyway, I leave you all today with a half can of Pepsi, chocolate cake, and these words for us. And so the Prophet warns us that when knowledge is suspended, in hadith, when ilm doesn't exist, what will happen? Fear the day when you shall be returned to God. This is the verse of the Quran. And shall be paid for what he has earned, and they shall not be wrong. This is the last verse of the Quran revealed. But the Prophet said there is coming a time for this community in which the preachers will be many and the fuqaha will be few. And in those days, knowledge will be better than action. Truly, God does not remove knowledge by extracting it from his servants. Rather, he removes knowledge by removing the scholars until when no scholar remains, the people take ignoramuses as their leaders. Then when they are consulted and give fatwas without knowledge, so they are astray and lead others astray. Allah help us. Seek knowledge, people, please. A time is approaching in which knowledge will be taken away, and one, trials will appear, fitna, and 2, greed will be present, and 3, killing will be increased. The one killing won't know why he is killing, and the one being killed won't know why he was being killed. Towards the latter days of indiscriminate violence, be like the first and better of the 2 sons of Adam, who said, if you raise your hand to kill me, I will not raise mine to kill you. Surely I fear God, the Lord of the worlds. That's not a message that belongs in town. It's eye for eye, tooth for tooth, and it's just please, what's that saying? An eye for an eye just leaves a bunch of blind people or something like that?
It's the whole world blind.
Leaves the whole world blind, thank you. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff. It's 5:15. I've overstepped my time. Please don't put it as a complaint. I try my best, to put it down. We ask Allah to give us tawfiq and give us success. Just for information, we have those classes at Al-Nur. We'll continue with the hadith. We'll get off our 3rd hadith next week. And then we'll get on to the 2nd point of those 8 points about intimacy with God. And then we'll be having a hadith tafsir class coming up. I have that class coming up about modern movements in Islam, ideological movements in Toronto. I'm going to have them recorded. Hopefully we'll have that made available if you're interested in that. It might be online. I've told them that they could do it in online. So if anyone's interested in that, just let me know. I've told them I'd like to do it online because I have people here who would like to participate. Yes.
I know we're over time, but some people want to stick around. I wonder if I could ask a general question about the presentation.
Sure, it's fine.
First, I wanted to ask your permission if I could just make a comment on the questions you asked. Also, if you're asking a question about, if we have in a matter like there's a weak position that, a woman who's raped will be seen as guilty. I mean, we have all these ikhtilaf and like matters of being violent, things like this that are largely personal preference, but with something like that, obviously someone can't say, oh, I want to go, give some punishment to such and such person. It's a government decision, right? So we can't,
well, that's a whole point. Vigilantism isn't a part of our religion. The only time you take things into your own hand really is an issue of immediate threat. Now there has that vision that, you catch your spouse committing adultery, you're allowed to kill that, that's there in the fiqh books, but I would not recommend anyone do that. I mean, go ahead.
To add to what he's saying, forget mob justice, taking it to a state level. For example, Pakistan. Pakistan specifically has these laws in which if you don't have 4 witnesses, the woman in turn becomes an adulteress, and then she can get stoned or be
something can happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, something as absurd as that on a state level is all
and you have supporting that too.
Yeah, they have these, I think it's across the board, maybe both Barelvi and Deoband, they're supporting it somehow. I don't know how, but they think it's a classical position. I haven't read much on it.
Well,
And because of this shit, I've had a few friends of mine ask me that, is this Islam really?
I was reading that paper you gave and looking at that, I find it that scholars taking such a position, they seem to be mitigating some of these maqasid of trying to eliminate harm. I mean, one of these maqasid, these positions, these qaida, one of the things clearly in them is that you always try to eliminate the worst case scenario. Try to eliminate it. I find it really absurd. I don't know how you try to prove it, but if a woman's been raped, how can she be guilty? It doesn't make any sense to me. Rape in a sense where, I don't know how you describe it. Even for me to even try to say, well, is there a case where, it's like a man would say, and this is what a man would say, well, maybe she deserved it because she was in a bad situation, or she was wearing skimpy clothes. Those are just male misogynistic issues. They don't make any sense.
In a society like that, it probably works because then they lose, basically, they don't want to sympathize with the victim. First thing is portray her as someone loose or something.
Yeah,
good for her, good riddance.
So maybe you will never change this if you change how the people think about things. But good luck.
Yeah.
You know, they have, we come here to America to study, you know, get them on to World of Warcraft. Yes, you were saying.
I'm just, sorry, just to jump in there. When I studied American criminal law, the situation was not that she deserved it, it was consensual. That's what the guy would argue always. You know, so she would think the thing was rape, and the guy would come back and say, no, it was consensual.
Yeah, because, you know,
So it's adultery.
because that's the tip of that, because they have cover laws, these laws that deal with slander. So if a man said, I raped her, that the woman is scot-free. But if he says she consented, then it goes, you know, he could say that she slandered me. So this was the play in Pakistan. The scholars, if they were saying, well, if we say that the woman was innocent in it, and that the man committed a criminal act, and the onus is on him, the penalty is on him. But if we don't do that, otherwise, then if we say, if a man said, and this is what people do, they'll abuse this, you know, they'll say, well, she consented to it. Well, then it becomes what? It becomes her going to lodge a complaint is then an act of qadr. She is now leveled a charge of slander on him, that he call it rape, call it whatever, and that goes back to his, and he has a right then to retaliate with her by saying, no, I didn't. And so it became this legal tip-tap between language, because once you call it zina, then I had a problem calling it zina, because zina has automatically a certain language to it, and it requires, apparently, you know, in their understanding, an immediate response that it's an adulterous thing. And so it's not a criminal thing, per se, in a sense of a force. A rape is something which implies some consensual thing, zina would. Yeah, I was reading this, I just find it very, you know, and I was very surprised that talking to Osmani was supporting that, you know, because I've read a lot of his stuff. I find, you know, I mean, all the stuff that he writes about, you'd think that he wouldn't support that position, but I found it surprising that he did. The one that, you know, that was I figured the negative position. What can I say? I mean, it's problematic. All I can say.
Which opinion? Because I read that Usmani's explanation of the hudud law in Pakistan. It was very different than what I'm hearing.
No, this one you had, it seemed like he was taking that position, but
From what I heard,
I mean, he was saying there was a problem with enforcement, that these cops were taking these women and doing that, but he said,
well, that's me. But there was just a theoretical legal discussion, not about, you know, other things that are going on and creating these problems. It's like, well, is this adultery? If it is adultery, then how are we going to define it? And then how do we deal with the man and the woman? And those are the points, you know. And there was this, you know, this give and take here between people see it as rape and people seeing it, you know, you could use this, you know, like people do that, you know. I mean, you have a society where you can get vengeance on something, you can get vengeance against a woman if you accuse her of this. Men use this, I mean, in these societies, I think in Pakistan, use it as a weapon. A weapon of control, a weapon of vengeance. You know, maybe you don't like your daughter-in-law. You know, and you have this out. If you want to hurt her, this is the way to hurt her. Accuse her of this, or something like that. I mean, I find it.
What's the?
I mean, I don't know what to say about it.
Can somehow this be brought in? Like, you know, we can bring in DNA testing, and that could
I mean, DNA, in a way, I mean, you have to show, I mean, that's the thing about things like that, you know, you have to show violence, physical, you know, trauma, or something that shows that this is most likely something which was non-consensual, you know. But that's the whole issue there about, you know, privacy issues there, you know, and they allow that, you know. Is it, you know, I was just recently reading about it, so I'm really not, I don't think as qualified as I probably should be on this topic, by the way, so I'll admit that. Yes.
Is it, we're talking about Qatlu and
Qatla,
is there an argument to be made for actually going to saying, is there any justification for that, or is that something that's?
Well, that's, I mean, obviously the Sahaba understood that, and that's why they left the raven.
And
They all